Good morning. Good morning to everyone here joining us in person and everyone else joining us via the web. We are here in the season of Pentecost, and Reverend Breth has determined that the season of Pentecost will be devoted to the art of storytelling. And today will be no different. We have two of our members who will be discussing their journey from the sidelines to center field, from watching and seeing what's going on in the city of Chicago and broader environs, and actually motivating themselves to act. The two congregants will be John O'Donnell and John Lee, a star-studded team indeed. But right now, please join me in the call to worship. Printed in your bulletin, please stand and embody our spirit. Just one would be enough. No multitudes of saints are required. No sea of saviors, no roll call for the righteous, no tumult of truth tellers. Just one passion dreamer who hadn't drifted into indifference. Jeremiah, the prophet, only needed one person, and he came up empty. Please continue standing and join together in singing hymn 488, The God of Abraham Praise. You may be seated. Please join me now in the prayer for wholeness, which we will say in unison. Holy One, sometimes the world feels overwhelming, and it seems as if the news is all bad. We all have days when we want to put our heads in the sand or just focus on the flowers and birds and trees in front of us. Deep down, though, we know and understand that it is through each of us and your presence in and through us that our world is going to change. Give us the passion, the persistence, and the vision we need. Attune us to your spirit all around us so that we know we are not alone in doing justice. Hear now our silent prayers. Friends, believe the good news. And please join me now in singing the passing of the peace.
So the running wave to you, deep peace of the flowing air to you, deep peace of the quiet earth to you, deep peace of the shining stars to you. The child of peace to you. Moon and stars pour their healing lights on you. The peace of the running wave to you. The peace of the flowing air to you. The peace of the quiet earth to you, the peace of the shining stars to you, the peace of the child of peace to you. Moon and stars pour their healing lights on you.
Today's scripture reading is a simple one, and it's God's statement to Jeremiah the prophet. He's whose request, as simple as it was, could not be fulfilled at the time. But this is the text. Go up and down the streets of Jerusalem. Look around and consider. Search through her squares. If you can find but one person who deals honestly and seeks the truth, I'll forgive this city. Simple request. Compassion.
thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. God unto me.
Chungers. In answer to God, if we were Jeremiah, we would say, maybe there's two in Chicago. The first one will be John Lee, and the second will be John O'Donnell, and I will turn it over to them.
Okay, well, thanks, Robert. So I'm John Lee, for those who may not know me. And when Beth asked me, I'm not exactly sure why I'm up here in a way. When Beth asked me to say a few words about what my inspiration was for the activism and work that I do, I really struggled to figure out what an answer to that would be. I'm not even sure like activism is the right word, and I certainly know the work I've done doesn't fit into one neat category. I probably can say that, again, thinking back over this to try to figure out what to say, I couldn't find any one real inspirational point. There was no, this is it. I'm very inspired. I want to do something. It mostly turned out that areas I was interested in, I ended up volunteering and sort of fell into a lot of these activities that I do. And from that, I just sort of built upon that. For those who don't know, I'll briefly go over the work that I've done. And for those who have heard these stories before, I'm sure many of you out there, feel free to check your phone for a while. It'll be a couple minutes here, and then we'll go on. I guess the work I've done probably falls into 4 categories. Maybe international human rights work, working with people seeking asylum, environmental work, and gun violence, but really through the works of St. Sabina. I've been involved with them more often than anything else. So for the human rights work, maybe this is a moment of inspiration. I took for those that don't know, I'm a lawyer also. And so I took a human rights course at DePaul University. The professor who taught it, Doug Castle, he's become really a friend now too, but the work he's done in international human rights is, he's one of the most important lawyers in the country dealing with this. And so he gave me my first case in international human rights. I represented the former mayor of La Paz, Bolivia, in her case against the government of Bolivia before the Inter-American Commission and Inter-American Court of Human Rights. After, it took about 12 years to get that done. After that was finished, I got involved with a group called the International Senior Lawyers Project in New York City. And senior, despite the hair color, senior means more experience than necessarily, people who've been around for a long time. With them, I went down to Peru and investigated a gold mine for human rights violations. We did a report on that. Right now, I am representing a woman down in Mexico, Alma Barraza, who's a human rights attorney in her case against Mexico. I represent her brother, and then a group of other people who were displaced when they built a dam outside of Mazatlan. That's sort of an ongoing case. For the people seeking asylum and refugees, I've done a lot of appellate work for a group in Tucson called Keep Tucson Together, and I'm representing the families we have here at Lincoln Park in their asylum efforts. Environmental, work on the green team here, but I'm also involved with Human Rights Watch and their environmental group, and teaching climate change at Loyola University. I think I'm really more passionate about that, because that's a way to reach people and try to explain the seriousness of the issue we have here. As far as the last category with St. Sabina, I've gone to the peace marches, and pre-COVID, several years before, we rode, with Beth also, rode on a bus out to DC for a big rally they had at the Capitol, which was a pretty inspirational journey, talking to everybody. So I guess, I know I have to put this in faith terms, in a way to wrap this up. So I guess the work I've done maybe goes toward the, I guess the eternal question of, well, who's your neighbor? So I've traveled to many different countries around the world, and maybe that's a source of inspiration. I started traveling right after college, and so I've been all around the world in different places. And so I found that for me, my neighbor, more often than not, at least the work I'm doing, is not necessarily in my local neighborhood. It's been elsewhere, So basically, neighbors can be anywhere, and that's pretty much where I found it. So to wrap it up, again, lacking one major, inspirational moment, triggering everything. I guess I can say is just to be open to possibilities. If you find something interesting, it's a little cliched, I guess, but you never know where these experiences are going to lead you. If I didn't take that one case right after law school, I don't think most of this other things that I've done, at least in human rights work, would not have happened. So again, you just build on that and listen and be open to possibilities, and within that you definitely will find inspiration somehow, even if it's not this a big aha moment, I guess. So, all right, with that, move it off to John O'Donnell.
Thank you, John. That was inspiring. Good morning, everyone. I am not used to being up here. Usually I'm in the back doing greeter or hospitality. So if anyone cannot hear me, please yell at me and I will speak louder. Pastor Beth, as you know, asked a few of us to talk about what made us go from being a bystander to an activist. I am not an activist, but I am actively involved in trying to do some good volunteer work. I want to start by talking about a real activist, Colin Kaepernick. We all know the basics of the Colin Kaepernick story. Colin Kaepernick was the starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, off and on, from 2012 to 2016. He led the 49ers in the Super Bowl in the 2012 season, where they lost 34-31. And he led them to the NFC Championship that following year. Around the start of the 2016 season, as we all know, when he was 28 years old and the backup quarterback for the 49ers, Kaepernick began taking a knee during the playing of the U.S. national anthem, rather than stand, as is customary, as a protest against racial injustice, police brutality, and oppression in the United States. His goal was to bring more attention to these important issues. The protests received highly polarized reactions, with some praising him and his stand against racism, and others denouncing the protests. The actions resulted in a wider protest movement. So, back when I was still working, before I retired, I was at a board meeting of my company, GKN Aerospace, in St. Louis, with about 15 board members, including members of the military. We were having dinner at some nice restaurant with everyone sitting around a big square table. One of the board members spoke up and said something like, "To see Colin Kaepernick and other NFL players disrespect the flag by kneeling during the national anthem is disgraceful. Now, these 15 men and women I was with are people I work with and deeply respect. They operate factories that produce parts that go into Boeing and Airbus products, and their constant goal is airworthiness. Airworthiness of your products is not something that can be faked. Airworthiness is a level of quality that most of us do not have to live up to in our daily life. It's a high-pressure job that allows all of us to get on a plane and travel the world. So these business people are very capable, dedicated, smart, and honest. But of course, I disagree with what he said. To me, there are two main kinds of arguments. There are just rhetorical arguments that might sound good or emotional, but are not based on the facts. And it is important to make factual, reasonable arguments that are based on the facts. And I was sitting right next to the man who spoke, which made it a little easier because I could turn right to him and say, I'm going to have to stick my neck out and say I disagree. I would not have done so when I was a younger man. One of the advantages of being older. We all know that kneeling is a sign of respect. That kneeling on one knee is the same gesture that I was taught to make as a child in Catholic school to show respect in church. So I think Colin Kaepernick might explain his actions this way. I think this country's ideals are wonderful. Those ideals include equal protection of the laws. They include innocent until proven guilty. And yet we have a huge amount of incarceration of people who have not been convicted of any crime. And we have seen that sometimes, and too often, these important ideals are not honored in practice. We have been hearing that for decades, of course, but in these last few years, cell phone cameras have allowed us to see how black people are actually mistreated by our government too often. I want my country to live up to its ideals. We all want our country to live up to those ideals. That is patriotism. That is being respectful to our flag. And I think he would say, I kneel to the flag to call attention and to show respect for those important American ideals that we must begin to live up to. So what happened to Colin Kaepernick for his activism? Kaepernick became a free agent after that season and never played in the NFL again. I am told that anybody who has a basic knowledge of football knows that his employment has nothing to do with his performance on the field. He paid a price. Then 4 years later, in 2020, we all suffered through the pain of watching George Floyd being killed in the street. And we all temporarily woke up to what Colin Kaepernick was trying to say. I quote, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell expressed remorse for the league not listening to Colin Kaepernick in 2016 when the former San Francisco 49ers quarterback peacefully protested during the national anthem. I wish we had listened earlier to what you are kneeling about and what you are trying to bring attention to, Goodell said. Goodell also expressed disappointment about how the league's players' peaceful protests were being portrayed, or had been portrayed. What our players were doing is being mischaracterized. That misrepresentation of who they were and what they were doing was the thing that really gnawed at me. So on the one hand, better late than never, better late than never. On the other hand, too little too late. So what is my point? Number one, I have to plug Colin Kaepernick's new graphic novel, Change the Game, partly because it was written with a Chicago, and I always like a Chicago connection. I'm sure many of you know about Eve Ewing, a professor at University of Chicago, author of Ghosts in the Schoolyard, all about the closing of 50 schools in Chicago. So she and he wrote this graphic novel about his experience that's really aimed at kids, of course. So this is one of the reasons I believe it is important to try to boost equity here in Chicago. So what have I done to be active? Well, it helped a lot that I retired in 2019. My old company was acquired, and 8 months later, it closed down the office where I worked. So that made my decision to retire rather easy. Before I retired, like many unfortunate people, I was obsessed with work, and therefore I would usually not make time for volunteer work, except about once per year when I would do pro bono work for a Saturday at the Expungement Summit. So after I retired, the question was what to do. Luckily, I was invited to attend a meeting of Becoming a Man at Percy Julian High School down at 103rd Street South. Becoming a Man, or BAM, is a great organization, as is its sister organization, Working on Womanhood, or WOW. Each BAM circle is about 10 high school boys supported by a few BAM counselors. And it was just wonderful to see the support that those adults offered to the kids, and it's just obvious what a difference it would make in inspiring those kids to feel like they are cared about and they can succeed. So afterwards, one of the BAM counselors asked me frankly, it's great that you're here, but why are you here? And I said, it drives me crazy that Chicago is a tale of two cities. I'm sure those were the words I used because we've talked about that for a long time. We have one part of the city that is very prosperous and successful, and another part is not. I think all Chicagoans would like for the prosperity to spread across the city so that everyone can benefit from all the opportunities that Chicago has to offer. As we all know, that is easier said than done. BAM asked me if I could take some of the expungement skills that I had and help out some of their high school students. In 2019, I helped form a partnership between Legal Aid Chicago and Becoming a Man. I visited numerous CPS high schools and eventually met with about 100 kids to help them expunge their juvenile records, to help break down one of the many barriers to success. And I believe a major factor in explaining how the world is the way it is that the status quo is just very powerful. If you happen to be in a school where everyone succeeds, you are much more likely to succeed. If you happen to be in a school with limited resources or where expectations are low, that will have major impacts on whether you can succeed. So currently, my primary way of trying to help out in Chicago, besides working at this church, is to support a great nonprofit. It's called Youth for a Better Future, and it is a great organization which provides all kinds of great after-school and summer programs for kids 7 to 14 years old near the former Cabrini Green neighborhood. That is just 1 or 2 miles from here. We are very lucky to be here in Lincoln Park, where it is very prosperous, and just 1 or 2 miles away, frankly, there is a lot of poverty in the neighborhood that he helps. Often the most important thing is to just keep showing up. The founder and executive director of Youth for a Better Future is Adem Aluka, and he has kept showing up to support Near North children consistently for over 10 years. YBF's overarching goal is to offer consistent, reliable mentorship to these kids with after-school field trips, STEAM exploration, dance groups, fitness, fashion, mentoring, and all kinds of programs that excite and motivate kids to discover the world and make it their own. I spent a day volunteering with him on Thursday, and just to see how much these 35 kids loved being with him, participating in the basketball programs, having the STEM teacher get them excited about optical illusions. It was just wonderful. But it is not easy, and it is a constant battle, mostly for money, but also just to keep everything running. Adem Aluka has said to me, the kids in this community are amazing, and I could see that they are. Poverty is not fun, and it is not a game. People want to make their lives better, but do not always know how to reach the goal. He is trying to make that difference for the youth in the near North neighborhood, and so I am trying to help him. And of course, I can't finish without saying I would invite all of you to make a contribution to Youth for a Better Future. If you Google Youth for a Better Future, I think it will be the first or second organization in the search results. So they've done a good job at many things, including SEO. Do you know what SEO is? Search engine optimization. That's one of the most important things in the current world. In closing, I'm not an activist, but Pastor Beth is an activist, and that is one of the many reasons that I love her. And one of the wonderful things she does in this church is urge all of us to be more active in the world. What I do does not take any courage, but I am a believer in the Nike motto, just do it. Yes, try to do it in a way that actually makes a difference, that actually succeeds, but most importantly, just do it. And then be persistent. Don't be put off because something goes wrong. It will go wrong, I can assure you. But if you try to be active in the world, both you and the world will benefit. Thank you very much.
As I listened to those stories, I was reminded I had a bit of a revelation myself reading a book, I don't know, it was about Book of Luke or something, but the difference in prophecy, when we hear the word prophecy, frequently we think of telling the future and the like, but another definition of prophecy is one who speaks truth to power, one who calls out those in power and those in, for the wrongs that they commit, that they do ordinarily as a matter of just inertia, and that's what the status quo is. And those who stand up and say no, and this is not right, are truly prophets as well. So again, Beth is I will second what John O'Donnell said about Beth as far as continuing the legacy of prophecy that this congregation has proudly worn for how many years, Gail? Yes, so anyway, and next week, 2 more members will tell their stories, Rhonda Howell and Jasper, what's his last name? Yeah, yes. Jasper Bauer will be telling their stories as well. So, in response to these stories, let us take a moment to reflect upon them. As John mentioned, Lincoln Park Presbyterian Church is situated in one of the sweet spots in the city as far as being blessed. And other parts of the city are not quite so blessed. But let's reflect upon our blessings and try to give back for the work of this church and its prophetic mission. Let us now receive our morning offering. And I suppose that by being here this morning or tuning in on YouTube on Sunday morning, you have taken a step toward being a prophet. And so I invite you to join with me in the litany for the lips of prophets that's printed in the Bulletin. For those weary of sharing their pain, for those who speak but are not heard, for those whose stories began centuries ago, for those whose testimonies are deemed a false witness, for those who have nowhere to turn for rest, for those who refuse to be silenced, for those who whisper tenderly and knowingly to their kin, for those who shout a holy protest to their oppressors, for those who wonder if there's any point, for those who cannot keep truth to themselves, for those who wail for all that has been lost, for those who sing for all that we might become, for those who call others to rise, for those whose voice reaches out like open arms for the hurting. May they be nourished in body and soul. May they be guided in wisdom. May community uphold them, and through the lips of prophets, your kingdom draw near. This is the summertime, and Beth is on vacation, so as far as invitations are concerned, again, I would remind you that next week, Jasper and Rhonda will share their stories as well, and I'm sure both of them are very interesting, as they are both such interesting people. Also, hospitality, please join us for hospitality after the church if you're here, after the service, if you're here in the sanctuary, at the back of the church. Please stand and join me now in singing the sending hymn, number 354, Guide My Feet.
We will sing verse 1 through 4.
And now join me for our vision of the week. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return no one evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak and help the suffering. Honor all people. Love and serve God, rejoicing in the power of the Holy Spirit. And now, please remain standing and we'll sing the benediction.
I'm saved.